Well, you've seen our next guest on many of Governor Pritzker's press conferences. He's the sign language interpreter by the governor's side, making vital information accessible to the deaf and hard of hearing. Please welcome Michael Albert. And as part of Deaf Awareness Week, we've invited sign language interpreter Mary Jo Winbush from the Chicago Hearing Society to sign for our viewers who use sign language during this segment. Hello, Albert. Hello, Mary Jo. So good to have you both.
Good afternoon.
Okay, so Albert, I gotta ask you, what does it mean to you to be front and center? Every time we see Governor Pritzker in a press conference, we typically see you too. What does that mean to you?
Well, I think for any interpreter, our goal is to communicate a message between hearing and deaf people. It doesn't matter if we're interpreting for the governor or interpreting for a Social Security appointment. So for me, this has been a great honor to be able to make this information accessible. Throughout the pandemic, the information has been so crucial, and I'm just happy to be a part of it. And I think my colleagues, the interpreters who've been working for these press conferences, for the governor and the mayor, I think all of us have brought a lot of dedication to this work.
Well, Michael Albert, I got to ask you, you're like a star now. You're famous. How are you dealing with your newfound stardom in this role that you've had over the last 6 months or so? I know you get this all the time now.
It's not comfortable. So interpreters, the work we do is generally not front and center. We're all generally off to the side and kind of doing our thing. And I've really thought long and hard about why it is that interpreters in this work have gotten so much attention, not only here in Illinois, but in other states as well. And I think I've come to realize that with all of this information that's often very grim and very hard to deal with, and very clinical and very statistical,
yes,
the interpreters provide sort of the emotional face behind all of that, and sort of the empathetic face behind all of that, which isn't to say that our leaders are not empathetic. They are, but they're presenting things in a very factual way. And I think the interpreters provide sort of the embodiment of that. We provide the emotion behind that.
It's interesting that you say that, because I was going to ask you about the emotion. And I've noticed this with interpreters. They're very expressive as they are signing. Why is that so? Because there is a specific reason to being emotional and embodying what you are signing.
Yes, absolutely. So the expression that interpreters exhibit has two functions. Certainly, we are trying to match the emotional content of the message. But at the same time, what we do with our faces is part of the grammar of American Sign Language. So what we do with our eyebrows, with our mouths, with the way our heads move, with our eye gaze, all of those things are grammar features of the language. But at the same time, yes, we are trying to match the emotional content of the speaker. And that's important. I think interpreters will vary on a continuum of expressiveness. I tend to be one of the more expressive interpreters. I think I'm on that end of the spectrum. And so I think that's probably one of the reasons why people have taken some notice of it. But we are trying to do our work without drawing attention from the speaker as well.
Right, because typically, interpreters are kind of in the background, and that's a role that you guys like and you embrace. But now, and I think the fact that Governor Pritzker was having a press conference daily for, it was, how many days in a row were you guys doing the press conference at one point?
80 days in a row.
80 days in a row. So yeah, that's why Chicago fell in love with you, and that's why Chicago got you, and you were front and center, and we're doing these interviews with you. I do have to ask you, Michael Albert, people have closed captioning at home, so why do you need an interpreter and you have closed captioning?
That's an excellent question. So American Sign Language is a separate and distinct language from English. It has its own grammar, it has its own syntax, and people who are native users of American Sign Language will vary a great deal in terms of their ability to read and work in the English language. So Americans, and even for people who are deaf, who know English, who are proficient in English, I think seeing the information in a visual language is just easier to comprehend, easier to take in for them. But for a lot of people, this information is extremely complicated, and there's a lot of medical terminology and statistics.
Right.
So I think being able to provide that in a visual way rather than having to see the words come across your screen is very helpful to a lot of people, not only those who require it, but those who may prefer it.
Right. Now, you're a hearing person. How did you even get involved with interpreting?
Well, it all started with an ASL class in the University of Illinois, Champaign.
Huh.
I was a senior. I needed 3 elective credits, and I thought it would be fun. And my friends thought we could talk in the bars when there was noise around. So I really got into it for very light reasons, and I never expected it to be my profession.
Right.
But through the course of my life, I had a deaf roommate at one point. I just fell into situations where my sign language skills became necessary. And eventually, after a graduate degree in clinical psychology, I decided to specialize in this field.
Wow. Well, it has definitely paid off. I love the line about, yeah, I figured we could sign at bars when it's crowded and you can't hear. that is genius. Okay. Michael Albert, Mary Jo, thank you both. And if you want to learn more about the Chicago Hearing Society and what they have to offer, make sure you head to chicagohearingsociety.org.